Hey guys, so I'm about to bring you my conversation with JVL about the state of the race and the state of swing voters, because that's who we're talking to. The 5 months we have to go until this election. But the news gods intervened this week as Donald Trump was convicted on all 34 felony counts in the Manhattan Business Records case after we taped. So this episode doesn't reflect that. But you better believe there'll be an episode about Trump's conviction soon as we catch up with voters and hear how it does or does not affect how they are thinking about this race. So now, my conversation with JVL. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Focus Group podcast. I'm Sarah Longwell, publisher of The Bulwark, and this week, with only 5 months to go in the longest presidential election ever, we are taking stock of our punditry. Despite some twists and turns, we've basically known for 3 years that we were likely headed for a Trump-Biden rematch. And frankly, the polls are not where we want them to be right now if you're a never-Trumper like me and my guest. It seems like every Sunday morning we're greeted with another poll showing Joe Biden losing most or all of the swing states. So, we're going to take stock of where things have gone wrong so far and what the Biden team might do to fix them, because we are heading into the home stretch. But the most important moments of this campaign are still in front of us. My guest today is my good buddy, best friend, Jonathan V. Last, editor of The Bulwark, and my co-host of The Next Level and The Secret Podcast, JVL. Love having you.
Yeah, I gave you the finger guns. I just holstered it, too. How'd you like that?
You excited? You come to play?
Boy, did I come to play. Did I come to play to talk about these fine Americans who are going to decide the fate of liberal democracy.
Well, we were talking to swing voters from swing states, so these are important folks for Biden to win. And I got to ask you, just level set with me here. Biden got kind of a slight bump coming out of the State of the Union. Yep. And Timmy and I did an episode about that back then, if you want to go check that out. But Trump has led this race pretty consistently since last fall. So do you remember? I mean, we talk about this stuff every week, this whole time. How is this general election, how it's going, matched your expectations of how you thought it would
go? I've had some cognitive dissonance over this election, and I think I've finally begun to sort it out, though, and come up with a grand unified theory of what's happening.
Okay.
My position all along has been that if you came down from Mars and you knew nothing about the polling, all you got to see was objective economic data, you would say the incumbent president should be leading by a minimum of 7 points. If you looked at the unemployment rate, the GDP growth, the real wage growth, all of the indicators, and the fact that it's not matching that, the fact that it's really Trump plus 2-ish, I mean, within the margin of error, but you know what I'm saying, means that something else is going on. So that was my mental framework for this. But I've gone and done a 180, and I've realized we're looking at the wrong polls. The economic data doesn't matter. The head-to-head polling doesn't matter. We should be looking at the feelings data. And if you look at all the feelings data, we got a big poll on this week in which 49% of the country said that we were at a 50-year high for the unemployment rate, and 62% of the country said that we were having contracting GDP and all that. People's feelings are so catastrophically bad that if you, without seeing any objective data or any, head-to-head poll matching data, you just looked at how do people feel about the world and not about themselves. How do they feel about the world? Because again, one of the things we've seen persistently is when you ask people about themselves, well, how are you doing? They're like, great. Things are good. But how they feel about the world, you would say, the incumbent's getting slaughtered. The challenger is going to win this race. And so my grand unified theory is that we have left a world in which anything matters. And the American people have become wholly untethered to reality. And I'm going to try to prove that case to you guys today as we interrogate some of the feelings of some of the people we hear.
Okay, so I'm happy to do that, and we're going to jump into the sound really quickly. But just real quick, like, you can interrogate the reality of what they're saying. And this is a bit of you and my fundamental disagreement. But so what? So you are going to tell me all the reasons they're wrong. But like, if they feel that way, like, isn't the job of Joe Biden and his campaign and the surrogates to help them understand what the objective truth is and try to help them not feel that way?
I mean, they can try, but that's like saying, isn't it your job to make the gravitational force on Earth be 9.2 meters per second when it no longer is that? Right? I mean, I just think something has fundamentally shifted in the world, and it may shift back, but it ain't going to shift back between now and November, in which people have unhooked from political life as we knew it.
Yeah.
And I think part of this is COVID related. I think part of it is that Donald Trump has offered people something like fascism. And it turns out that a lot of Americans like that. And the only reason they hadn't asked for it before is because nobody had offered it to them at the top of a major party ticket. And I just think that a whole bunch of our assumptions about how things work and what different groups of people want and what would turn people off are probably wrong. And I am open to the idea that Donald Trump's understanding of what the American public wants is closer to reality at this moment in American life than, say, mine was as of like 7 years ago.
Okay. Well,
it's our first okay of the day.
Okay. Yeah, just the first one of this. I'm gonna pick my time where I push back or put my spin on it. All right, man. I want to get into your usual complaints about the voters, but lately we've been hearing like some green shoots. When we ask about the state of the country, there is some acknowledgement here and there that the economy is getting better. But I don't know, man. These swing voters still didn't sound like things were that great. Here's what we heard from a recent group of Trump to Biden voters.
I think it's kind of mixed. I think social media has gotten so consuming, and network news media systems are constantly feeding out bad images to make you agree with what they believe is going on. And I think there's been a lot of advancements, but just not at the level that we were expecting coming out of COVID.
The unemployment, I feel, is deceptively misleading. I feel the inflation is a bit out of hands, especially when we're printing money, it feels like, and giving it away. More so, taxes are not being utilized inside the country, but it seems more and more outside. So I find a lot of lack of say in our own government. I feel a lot of who's in power making money versus the everyday person climbing the ladder.
The immigration issue that's hitting Arizona, hitting the whole country. I live in an area, it's called Ahwatukee. It's right at the beginning of Phoenix. And we see hotels that are closed up. The lights are off, but there's cars and cars and cars parked all around it. So they're housing these immigrants in hotels, which they need to stay somewhere, but that's not on my penny. And I don't think we can recover with all of this happening. Biden is trying to create the immigrants that aren't U.S. citizens to vote and to be able to swing that vote across to Biden. They're bringing over T-shirts with Biden on the T-shirts. So they're definitely being influenced from outside. There's just so many issues.
All right. So I got to say, so all these people voted for Biden in 2020. Just going to start with that as you hear sort of their complaints. But I hear this about immigration all the time. It is to the extent that I tell Democrats, where I think some of these big vulnerabilities are. Immigration, I talk about all the time. And you hear it from Democratic voters. You hear it from people in these critical sort of Western states like Arizona, where they are so frustrated about Biden's handling of immigration. And I think Biden can say until he's blue in the face that Trump scuttled the border security deal. But it's hard to say, I think that this administration has dealt with the border well. So how do you make the case to voters like this one in Arizona, right? What should Biden do to win someone like this over?
Well, that gentleman's never voting for Biden again. Yeah, I mean that's clear from listening.
That
to him.
gentleman was not going to vote for Biden. He was going back to Trump. It's true.
Yeah, and I mean, I would like to see some photographic evidence of masses of people coming into the border, coming across the border wearing Biden T-shirts. I was not able to find any of that in my research. Maybe it happened.
Did you find people coming over though?
Coming
In
over,
large
sure,
numbers?
people come over. Here's my question for you, and this is a level set. Who is the last American president who handled the border really well?
Yeah, I mean,
Because
I think
it's never been handled well. Because it's an impossible situation.
Well, that's okay. I mean, I don't think that's exactly right. And the last time there was real meaningful engagement on the border issue was when the Gang of Eight, which under George W. Bush, really made an attempt to have like a real policy effort. Yeah.
So all I'm saying is, like, yes, Biden has not handled the border well. Trump did not handle the border well. Obama did not handle the border well. W tried to and didn't. The reason is because, again, this is an intractable problem because we have a very large border and we are a very wealthy and economically dynamic country. And so people are going to come here. Like that's just the fact of life. But put that aside. I mean, some of the things, so I've been told not to use their names. So I'm going to refer to these gentlemen by first names, by first letters. Mr. A talked about the problem that we are printing money and the taxes are not being utilized inside the country. I don't know if he understands that the executive branch does not handle monetary supply. That's a function of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve takes care of all of that. The policies he's referring to are the quantitative easing policies that were first put forward under the Obama administration and then kept as the zero interest rate policy under Donald Trump, and which the Federal Reserve has since abandoned under Joe Biden, raising interest rates. And so this is a thing which Biden does not control and which in fact has gotten better under Biden, but which he blames Biden for. And then when he talks about money being utilized inside the country, this is a theme which comes up with a few of the people in the groups, especially with Ukraine aid. They seem to believe that America is putting together big pallets, saran wrapped of $100 bills, like we're drug dealers, and just like flying them in a C-130 over Kyiv and kicking them out the back of the plane with parachutes attached to them. Here's money to fight. That's not how this works. What happens is we take old stock U.S. weaponry, we ship it over to Ukraine, and then we pay American defense firms to make new stuff to replace it. And those people then pay American workers to do the job of creating those armed systems. This money, to the extent the money is being spent, it is going directly back into the American economy and American jobs. And I just, again, when people don't understand basics like that, I don't quite know how you reach them.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you how, which is that you give them this information, like you have a messenger that can communicate with them effectively, that can be the one driving the narrative. And when you don't have an affirmative narrative being driven aggressively, other people are able to dominate with, I mean, you're right, to the extent that you're correct that a bunch of these voters are misinformed about the state of things, doesn't change the fact that this is what they believe and that work has to be done to educate them. Like that's what the work is of campaigns and of administrations. And so like when you're just like, well, they believe these things and those things are wrong, I'm sort of like, okay, but they're going to vote based on the information they have. And we better get aggressive about giving them different information.
Is it information or is it feelings?
Okay.
That's my question. And I think that's the fundamental question.
They're getting information. They're getting this. They're hearing it from somebody. That guy heard from somewhere that people were coming across wearing Biden shirts. Right? Like that's a thing somebody said that he has heard. Here's the thing. I'm gonna stipulate for the moment because we have so much sound and I want people to hear these voters. I'm just gonna stipulate your point that they are incorrect and yet this is the way they feel. And I want to keep moving through it because
keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to visit a theme that's highly relevant to the work that I do, which is how people think about a second Trump term. And so there's a lot of stuff I want to chew on with you. Let's listen.
I think he's going to go on a revenge tour. Anybody that wronged him, he's going to even probably try to change the terms of the presidency to make it instead of 8 to 16 years so he never get voted out, become more like a dictator. It's sad to say because I'm like in the middle because I don't like what Biden's doing and I'm scared of a second term with Trump, but then I do want to see what he's going to do. I mean, I'm just all over the place in my rationale and who I'm going to vote for this year.
I think he's just going to do what he did last time, just fire a bunch of people in the federal government. It's not anything really that new. The transition's not going to be as great as it was from 16 to 20. It's not going to be great from 20 to 24. It's kind of what you really want from a person when they step into office. They're going to fire a bunch of people, and then everything else will be exactly the same.
I think the revenge tour, that's a good descriptor of it. Like, honestly, like, I don't see the terms changing because that's like a process and it hasn't changed however many years of this country being here. So like, it almost like be refreshing to just get it out of the way in a sense with either candidate. Then they're done. And then we can just move on to the next batch.
So that last guy, I think, is kind of sobering because, I kind of do this thing at the live shows at the end of them where I talk about how authoritarians succeed by wearing us down. And in this case, saying, let's just get Trump over with, that feels, it's hard enough for us to keep our guard up, like you and me, about how dangerous another Trump term might be. So, like, to ask these voters to like stay on high alert all the time, I think is a lot to ask of them. But to be clear, that guy was going to vote for Biden in the end, but not everyone in the group who was making similar points. They weren't sure who they were going to vote for. And I know you want to respond to the woman who sort of suggested that, like, yeah, Trump's going to blow things up and maybe that's good. So go ahead, hit me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to come to Miss D last, but I want to talk about Mr. J, and who said something very similar to something that Mr. R also said, not in this sound, but later in the group. So he said that, what's Trump going to do? He's just going to do what he did last time, try to, replace a bunch of people in the federal government. This is what it's always like in transitions. It won't be a good transition. So that is not true. The transition from 2020 to 2021, that presidential transition in which A, the sitting president refused to leave until the final day, B, in which every member of his cabinet was instructed not to cooperate with the transition team of the incoming president, that is historically atypical. It has never happened before. That is not standard operating procedure. This is not just how things go. This is another guy, Mr. R, said, when talking about what Trump would do in his second term with replacing people and whatnot, he said, but that's just what Biden did. Joe Biden fired all kinds of people from the military to justice to everywhere to all levels to get his people in. That's exactly what he did. And this is just not, again, Biden's takeover of the executive branch of the government was totally within historical norms. The transition to Biden was not. Can
I just say what I hear in there? I'll just as a quick matter, which is, a lot of people in our world talk about Schedule F and how, but won't this, and isn't it so frightening? And I'm like, voters just think that's what presidents do. They come in and replace people and install the people on their team. Like that's
and you're
what
never going to be
voters.
able to explain that to people.
Yeah.
You are never going to be able to explain Schedule F to people.
Which is, that's right. And this is what's interesting about this group is like, they're even clocking the authoritarian possibilities, but like, they don't understand why the consequences of that would be bad.
There's another one. Mr. R also said in talking about Trump's second term, he was talking about the attempts to get Trump from the Democratic Party. He said the Democratic Party has gone after him for accusing him of multiple issues and on and on and on. He was never convicted of one thing, and he still isn't being convicted of one thing. And I mean, he is currently on trial for a felony. There are three other felony indictments just sort of sitting out here, which he has only not been convicted of because he's been trying desperately to delay him. He was found liable of sexual assault and business fraud. Like those two things just happened like 12 weeks ago. That's a real thing. Anyway, but back to D, and Miss D, I did not read her as saying, yes, Trump would be a dictator and it would be terrible, but maybe things need to be blown up. I did not read that as maybe the system is so sclerotic that, torching it all is the only thing. What I took that as, when she has that pause, is, but then I do want to see what he's going to do. That is somebody who views it as entertainment. And it was just like, I don't know, like the new character on this show that I watched just came in. And that character's kind of interesting. And who knows what'll happen. And the extent to which that is divorced from the understanding that government is a real thing that happens in the real lives of real people. Like, I don't even know how to answer that. Because that is, again, it's the purest distillation of my thesis here. It's all just about feelings. It's just about feelings, man.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this idea of like entertainment, when the moderator at one point asked about the debates, and there were a few people who were like, yeah, I'm going to watch the debates to learn something. Actually, this particular person that you're referencing, though, wasn't going to watch the debates.
Miss D was not going to, yes.
Bridgerton was going to be on or something, and who cared about these things. But the rest, there was a number of people who said like they were going to watch it just like, because, things could pop off. Yeah.
He could start yelling again.
Yeah.
No, literally, one of them said that. It was like, last time, remember how he was yelling and screaming over Biden? And he might do that again.
I do think that's an important, I know it's disconcerting, but I do think it's important as a way to understand voters about how we're talking about authoritarianism and we're talking about dictatorships, and they're talking about like, going to get popcorn because this is going to be funny, and how lightly many of them carry it.
January 6th was a laugh riot.
So you brought this up, so I want to get through it. I want to get into the legal issues around Trump. So obviously we're all waiting, and it's possible that actually by the time this airs, we'll have a verdict. So in the hush money case, but in the meantime, we've been taking voters' temperatures on Trump legal news. And I want to pivot away from the flippers for a moment. We recently did a group of 2020 Trump voters in North Carolina. We just released that episode last week, about the North Carolina governor's race, if you're interested. But I want to specifically talk about how these voters who are not voting for the Republican governor candidate, Mark Robinson, the Holocaust denying, evangelical kind of crazy person, but they are voting for Trump again. And I want to listen to how they talked about the New York trial.
Our country right now has so many dishonest politicians that, if the leader has that history, then how are you going to say bad things about, say, somebody running for the Senate or for Congress when the person in charge of the whole country has all this history? So it's like, well, Trump did it and nobody made a big deal about it. I mean, I'm sure there's lots more things that he could be tried for.
Well, it sticks out to me that the Federal Election Commission 10 years ago decided not to pursue this. The attorneys general at that time, New York, DC, whatever, decided not to pursue this. The bringing in of Stormy Daniels and her sex with the ex-president had nothing to do with the current charges. It was all for theater. That's when I say it's being weaponized. I really think it was inappropriate. And if anybody was following, Michael Cohen's testimony, I think you'll all agree, maybe you've forgotten that you're innocent until proven guilty. But according to Michael Cohen's testimony, they haven't nailed Trump yet, because there's been nothing in any of the emails or phone conversations or anything that's come up through Michael Cohen's testimony that says that Trump told him to do it. I mean, Michael Cohen says he told him to do it. I really thought that there would be solid proof, and that has not come up. And it's interesting because I read about it in the New York Post and I watched the 5 on Fox News, and it was like, boy, they're going to throw this case out because of X, Y, and Z. And then I watch it on ABC and it's like they're talking about a different trial. I mean, it's very confusing. If it confuses me, I can't imagine somebody that has no political background or whatever.
To me, it's a distraction, white noise kind of thing. I'm not saying that he's not guilty of a lot of things, but I do think that they are focused in on it. And a big part of me says if it was anybody else, it would have never been taken to trial. It's just a big distraction right now. And it is not going to matter to me. He's the one who's going to be the nominee. I think he's the one who can turn the economy and the inflation around. And he's got my vote. So everything that's going on, all of his indictments, they really don't bother me. I think Stormy Daniels was a joke up there.
And I'll just say, if you listen to the North Carolina episode we did, these people were so down on Mark Robinson for being a crazy man. So these are not these are not just irrational people. Like, they were judging Mark Robinson as absolutely too extreme and out there. Do you have something you definitely want to say, or can I turn to the flippers about the trial?
I mean, I would just like to say two things quickly, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Miss S, who is the lady who said that it sticks out to her, the Federal Election Commission 10 years ago decided not to pursue this. The attorney generals, first of all, this wasn't 10 years ago. This all happened in 2016. But you said the attorney generals decided not to pursue it. So the reason no criminal cases were pursued against Donald Trump is because he was the sitting president. And you can't do a criminal proceeding against a sitting president. That the Office of Legal Counsel is, boy howdy. The was interesting because basically like, yeah, he's guilty of a lot of things. I don't care. Okay. Again, it's not a question of better information, right? That's not what this is about. And I mean, there is one key difference between Donald Trump and Mark Robinson. I don't know if you've noticed.
Is it the color of Mark Robinson's skin?
It might be. I mean, you can say I don't see color. So when I see Donald Trump and Mark Robinson, they look the same to me.
Right.
But it seems possible to me that other people in Republican world might. Who can say? I mean, I don't want to peer into the hearts of others.
Well, this episode led me to one of my more worrying observations that I've had in a long time. I talked about it a little bit on the Next Level, which is just that, look, Mark Robinson is extremely out there. He is like a Holocaust denier. Now, Trump has only dined with Holocaust deniers. Yeah, so, totally I don't know if it's...
Who among us hasn't?
I do think there's a lot of other... I think Trump's celebrity...
Some of my best friends are Holocaust deniers,
I think
Sarah.
The fact that Trump is able to, he's got a Jewish... he's got Jewish grandkids, Jewish son-in-law. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of ways in which Trump is able to elide some of his more despicable beliefs about people that just like other people can't. That it's always he's got some specific things that help him out. Anyway, I want to go though to. Can
I just say we're going to highlight this again when we talk about this group's feelings about Kamala Harris, which I think, again, provide another data point as to why they might see Donald Trump differently than they do Mark Robinson. That's all I'll say on that. Just to see the ground.
Now, let's listen to how the flipper group, these Trump to Biden voters, talked about the cases generally.
All of them are red flags in my mind, just because it shows the kind of person that he is and like what he does behind the scenes. Like, I don't look at it as white noise. I look at them as like, at least from what the information that I've read and presented with through social media and whatnot. And it just, all of them, I guess, is the answer for that.
If anyone thinks that Trump or Biden will ever face a conviction and sit a day in prison, there's another thing coming. I would guarantee it, put my entire legal future on the line and say that if Trump was convicted, Biden would pardon him the very next day. Because that's just how this big boys club works.
It's kind of a standard with everything, and from movie stars to anyone that faces the camera, they get some sort of immunity, and that's not right. There should be one standard across the country, but that will never happen.
The mishandling of classified documents stands out the most for me. I mean, I'm paying attention to all of them. I have mixed feelings about it because I do believe that there is a degree of witch hunt happening, that, the opposition needs to find something to stick. So let's throw as much as we possibly can at him. Having said that, I'm not naive to think that Donald Trump is not capable of doing terrible things, misrepresenting numbers, paying off people, all of those things. I'm just paying attention to all of them.
Even if some of this is a witch hunt, not all of it is. There's a little bit of truth in every lie. And so why would we want to vote for somebody that's being attacked and accused of so many things? We want that individual running our country. Yeah, he's a shrewd business person. He got where he is, where he was, by being a shrewd business person, not caring about others and finding every loophole possible. And that's what he's doing in court as well. It's what his attorneys are doing.
So it's clear in the aggregate, this isn't the most serious case to people, but it's still a good example of why Trump's character is beneath the presidency. George Conway and I talk about this all the time on the legal podcast. So do you think a guilty verdict matters at the margins, or and what do we do if he gets, what happens if he gets acquitted?
I mean, if he's flat acquitted, I think he wins the election.
Yeah.
If it's a hung jury, maybe that complicates things, although maybe that's just as good as total exoneration. I don't know. I was really surprised by this group and the extent to which people took the Stormy Daniels election fraud case much more seriously than I would have imagined. When we talk about this, we always say this is the least serious of the four. This is, there are many people who thought it shouldn't have even been brought, and it was unhelpful that it was brought. Not everybody, it wasn't universal, but most of the people who had any thoughts about Trump's indictments being problematic thought that this case, the election fraud case, was really important, and that it was important because of fraudulent financial records. That mattered to them a lot. And I was really surprised by that. Now, maybe there is some latent bit of that hanging around out there in public opinion that just hasn't been seen yet. Nobody's touched it yet. Maybe a conviction would cause something. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe saying that John McCain isn't a war hero will cause something, right? Maybe saying that he has sympathy with the neo-Nazi protesters in Charlottesville will cause them. Maybe January 6th riots will cause them. This is why I'm a little nervous about saying, don't worry. But I would say, so Mr. B, who was the last person you heard on the sound there, who was a flipper. So he voted for Trump in 2016, then voted for Biden in 20. And he is one of your classic Trump voters. He says, I voted him into office in 2016 because I thought, okay, time for a business person to be, our country should be run as a business. Let's put a good business person in there that has done something. But now, I'm slightly editing this and condensing this. After putting him in the public light for his first term and through Biden's term, he is the most unethical business person I know, and I would never work for him.
Yeah, that guy was going to vote for Biden.
That guy was going to vote for Biden, but you see why he got there, right?
Yeah.
And it was from the I want a business person running the government, and it wasn't like, oh, I was wrong, we shouldn't have a business person. It was actually, this Trump guy is very, very bad news.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting. Again, combined with the extent to which most of the people thought that the Stormy Daniels election fraud case was very serious.
Yeah. Okay.
Did that surprise you? How seriously they took the election fraud case?
No, I mean, look,
in Manhattan?
everybody, I'm on the reporters, everybody's pre-writing their story. What happens if Trump gets convicted? And everybody asks me if it's going to matter. And I say it will. I mean, I listen to the swing voters and I think it will on the margins. I don't think it hurts Trump to get convicted as much as it helps Trump if he's acquitted.
Strongly agree.
I do think that listening to the swing voters, and I've listened to them, they're not following the cases super closely, but they know enough about them to be like, yeah, and this guy is he's a criminal. And if he's convicted, I think it makes a difference at the margins for some people. I think it pushes people. Look, this is a campaign where you got these double haters. And so you gotta, which guy do they hate more? And so everything you throw on the pile for Trump is a little helpful at the margins of disqualifying Trump in these voters' minds who don't like either guy, but at the end of the day, kind of think Trump's too dangerous. Because I'll say, I was going to say at the end of it, but in this group, I guess the good news is 5 out of the 8 voters in one of the main swing voting groups to listen to, we did several, but they were all, this is pretty consistent across these swing voting groups. The majority of them were going to vote for Biden again. 3 were going to vote for Trump.
Yeah.
The bad news is that the bad news is those people voted for Biden last time and they are backsliding. Like these are the Biden backsliders that
you can't lose 28% or 27% or whatever it is.
And I don't want to treat the focus groups like polls. I just do want to treat them though as a data point where we're talking to a lot of swing voters and we've been seeing backsliding now for more than a year among these voters who voted for Biden. And they don't, some of them, like we had one guy said he wished he hadn't, but for the most part, it's not that they wish they hadn't. They just they're like, no, I don't, this was worse than I thought. Okay, hold on.
Can I just say one more thing though?
Yeah.
Boy, don't sound so disappointed. I want to believe like you that a guilty verdict matters. But if a coup didn't matter, this is what stops me, right? I mean, again, he attempted a coup.
They've been told it wasn't a coup. I mean, this is where you and I obviously are so different. Listening to them, I can hear the information that they're getting. I know what they're getting just barraged with. And it is a bunch of these are center-right voters and they are in center-right or like right-wing ecosystems. They swim in sort of a soup of Trumpism culturally. And like everybody they know is like, what about Black Lives Matter? And like, it has dwindled over time, the severity of what they think happened that day. All right. If we are depressing you with this talk about swing voters going back to Trump, great news. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Therapy is a great outlet when you need to talk about the problems that life throws at you. JVL and I, we talk to each other a lot about the problems life throws at us, but we both would agree, get a therapist. It's good. Maybe you're a beleaguered writer and podcast host who keeps getting dragged onto a show to listen to opinions from voters that infuriate you. Or you're working on a campaign tasked with re-electing a president everyone thinks is way too old. Or you're a former president facing 88 felonies who's running for president again to stay out of jail. And if you happen to be any of those people, you don't have to go to a stuffy doctor's office to get help. BetterHelp custom matches you with a licensed therapist who you can talk to 100% remotely, either via text-based messaging, phone, or video calls. Yeah, you can just text. It's super convenient if you have to squeeze in sessions between court dates. Let's face it, this country is going to need a lot of therapy before and after this election, no matter what happens. So get a jump on your therapy journey at betterhelp.com/thefocusgroup. That's betterhelp.com/thefocusgroup. And Focus Group podcast listeners can get 10% off their first month. Now, when we asked Trump to Biden voters to give him a letter grade, no one went higher than a C. And he even got a few Fs. Also something I consistently see across swing voter groups. Rarely gets above a C, sometimes gets a couple of Bs in a particularly friendly group, but I would say this is not an outlier. So what we asked people what Biden could do to move up a grade, and let's listen.
I believe as we see him age, and everybody talks about that, just because someone, speaks slower and thinks before they speak, I find that to be a positive versus somebody that just, a Donald Trump who just talks and doesn't hear what comes out of his mouth. I think he just needs to take a stronger stance, stronger position just on the things that he feels strongly about and supports. I believe that he wavers too much based on what the Senate and Congress say.
I haven't seen any border blocking. I haven't seen money being retracted from other countries or lower spending. He spends and spends and spends far above what we can afford. That's why inflation's so sky high, because they're trying to compensate for all the money that's being made.
taking a stance more on what he wants, but I don't know that he has the support around him of being able to do that. Like that was one thing with Trump. Like if somebody didn't agree with him, like they were out, and he would find somebody that just said yes to him, right? And he knew his agenda and he was set on it. And I don't feel like Biden has that. I feel like he's getting all this outside influence.
I would add, if he didn't pick Kamala Harris, that would be a real, I know it's going against everything I said because he's been sticking with her this entire time, but she's like the one person who just did so much damage in California for so many young black men. And she hasn't done anything as vice president. We want to talk bad President Biden, whatever, but Kamala has not done a single thing. So if he actually said that we're going to change our actual direction and represent a new America, then drop her and move on with this.
So, you know, this idea, you had two people say roughly the same thing. You heard one person literally said the word strong, and the other person said, take more of a stance. And I got to say, when we ask people this, what could Biden do better? It's always the word strong. They want him to be stronger, tougher, take a bigger stand, be more visible. So listen, you and I, we've done a lot of punditry. I think we talked about this on the last show. You've written about how Biden needs to hang a lantern on his age, clear the dementia bar. And it seems like he did that in the State of the Union. So while these folks weren't quite talking about him like in dementia terms, they did talk about how weak he was. And so how does the Democratic Party or Biden project more strength?
I just want to, again, this is going back to my fundamental thesis here that people don't want real things. I want to go back to Mr. B there, who's the guy who said, take a stronger stance. And he's this guy, Mr. B, I am pretty sure is not voting for Trump. I think he is one of the guys who said, yes, he's going to vote for Biden when you do the gun to the head. I just want to read again what he said. I think he just needs to take a stronger stance, stronger position just on the things that he feels strongly about and supports. I believe that he wavers too much based on what Senate and Congress say. That is true. Biden wavers all the time based upon what the Senate and Congress says because they're the legislative branch. And what you need to do to pass laws in America is that the chief executive works with the legislators and they compromise and give the things that they kind of want but kind of don't want, and they are weak and they give that because it's so much weakness. But then at the end of the day, I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill. They sign the bill into law and things get
shouting
made.
JVL Schoolhouse Rock.
And I just, the American Rescue Plan, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, the Electoral Count Reform Act, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the Respect for Marriage Act. And this is in addition to all the stuff about like closing the Medicare subsidy cliff and lowering prescription drug prices. Biden's legislative record is among the most impressive of any first-term president in recent memory. Certainly since Clinton, probably even a little more so. And yet, what they want isn't the legislative record. Person after person said, well, I thought he'd do more. He didn't do anything. We had one woman who said that all Biden does is talk about the things he likes to get to, he wants to do, and he never actually does them. And I was like, I'm sorry. Sarah Longwell every week tells me that it's the exact opposite, that Biden, it's not good enough to have done all the things. You need to talk about it more. And this woman hears him talk about it more and is like, oh, all he does is jaw, jaw, jaw. And when people who just they want the vibes or the feelings of strength, that is an attitude which wants a strong man. It doesn't want a president.
Can I just say?
It doesn't want a president.
Okay, but hold on one second. Like, there's a bunch of little data points. Like, when TV started, right? Suddenly, the handsome younger John F. Kennedy really, just clowning on this old sweaty guy running for president named Nixon, right? And why do we always elect taller people? This is why I'll never be president. So it's why Abigail Spanberger.
Say that.
Abigail
Don't
Spanberger
you say that. I
can
want you to be president
someday because she's tall. And I'll never get there. I'm too short. And it's just a truism that, the voters want somebody tall. And so I guess my point is that people are barraged with just an insane amount of information now, and not just political information, but all kinds of stuff. And so, yeah, they're starting to read vibes, and they've always made intuitive decisions about things that do not matter related to policy. I just don't think this is that unique. And that's why I think that, running somebody who is 82 is a tough choice.
The other guy's like 3 years younger.
Okay.
And he looks like walking death.
That's not true.
It's
objectively untrue.
A 16th of an inch of bronzer on him at all times.
No,
and whenever the wind catches him on a tarmac, like at the right angle, and it comes up, and you see that line back here where everything is bone white, and you see how thin the hair is, he looks like the Grim Reaper.
Yeah, and if you are either on social media
shuffles
or
a little bit
follow
like
people
this,
who
he's
highlight
wildly
those
overweight.
Things, but I don't think so. I think he's back. I think he's on the Ozempic or something. He's trimming out. Look, man, I think that I know people like to say Trump is 3 years younger. He has big lunatic energy. You hear him out there. He stands there in the heat for an hour and a half and does his thing. I'm sorry. There's a difference, and it's going to matter. It's going to matter.
People want a lunatic. Can I just keep talking about our friends here from this section of the focus group, or do you? One more. Let me do one more.
Well, go ahead.
One more from Miss D, who gave Biden an F. Here's a request for you.
Miss D was going to vote for Biden. Just
you know, the moderator had to press her so hard. She kept saying, "No, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know." And the moderator was like, "D, hey, this is just a game. Your vote's not actually getting cast." And she finally was like, "Fine, Biden."
Okay.
So here's my first ask: when you ask people to give letter grades to Biden, can you then follow up by asking them for letter grades on Trump, W, and Obama? Because I think that would level set.
We could
because
do it
I
on
can't
Trump.
imagine that any of these people would give W a better grade than a C. I think most of them would not give Trump a better grade than a C, and might not even give Obama much better than a B. I just think it would level set. But anyway, so here's one of the things Ms. D said. She's talking about all the terrible things that Biden has done, and specifically the border. And she says, he needs to tighten up the border. When I visited Africa, you can't just walk in. I mean, there are people there with guns. You're not just walking into any area in Africa. I can just read you two things from some recent United Nations reports from the Office of Drug and Crimes. The porous nature of the borders in West and Central Africa is a major factor of insecurity. The borders are neither demarcated nor sufficiently controlled. From the UN Counterterrorism and Border Management Report, despite the efforts of member states in Africa to strengthen border security, a number of countries continue to face challenges, with terrorism and violent extremism spreading across parts of the African continent, including through the movement of foreign terrorist fighters. I am sorry, if you think that border security is better in Africa than it is in America, I can't help you. I just can't.
Okay.
It means that she saw some dudes with machine guns at the airport when and she's like, "Yep, I guess they do a good job controlling their border."
Okay, I got to close with one of the most consistent findings in our focus groups, and that's voters' dislike of Kamala Harris. Let's listen to what Trump Biden voters have said about her over the last few months.
I don't really see her out and doing things, and if she is helping Biden, you don't see it. So I am worried about that he will not survive 4 more years. I mean, he's 81. He's probably going to turn 82 sometime soon. So then 4 more years on top of that, 86. Even though he has a lot of people around him, 86 is pretty old to be in that type of position. Not that people can't work till they're 80 or 90, but that type of stressful position where you are on all the time. I don't see her being there to support him. And yeah, she rubs me the wrong way too. I mean, she seems like she might be a very nice person, but anything I've seen with her, I've always kind of been like, oh, yeah. So he needs to pick somebody else, and then I would vote for him.
She disappears. And then she's at schools talking to kids and reading. I mean, that's very nice, but it doesn't pay the bills, so to speak. She doesn't know her job. That's what the problem is. She just doesn't have the experience. And they've been trying to cover up for that.
She's kind of got that unlikability like Hillary Clinton did. I don't know Why? Because when I see her as a person with her husband or family, she seems very nice and likable. But as a politician, there's something about her that it doesn't grab me. But I have nothing concrete.
It's just sometimes people rub you the wrong way.
I think she was very successful in her career as whatever she was, prosecutor or whatever in California. And she seemed to have credentials, but maybe not, like you said, for president or vice president. I don't know.
I think I hold it against her too, because you don't know what she's doing. The two things I do know she did, she stood up like a border task force the first year. And then after Uvalde, she was on the gun violence task force. We haven't seen improvement with either of those.
Okay. So it's very clear that voters know they might be voting for Kamala Harris if they're voting for Joe Biden. And that's a huge negative. And I don't know what to say. This is across all the swing voting groups. I hear it all the time. And you said a year or so ago she has the political yips. Why hasn't her situation improved, do you think?
Boy, I don't know. It's a little tough to say, why don't people like him, when in the same focus group you have one person say, I don't like her because of her laugh. It's the laugh. And then another person says, they only show her when she's angry. She'll be angry about this or anything about that. And I'm like, she can't be an angry person all the time. And so one person hates her because she's always angry and has never seen her smile. And the other person hates her because she doesn't like her laugh. I'm just like, okay. I don't know what to do with that. Except to say that this is all feelings based. Again, it's just all feelings based. And
I just don't think that's that unusual.
It may not
voters
be.
have feelings.
Yeah, it may not be. So much of this, I will say that on this, I really don't trust the political instincts. One of the people in this group said that two of the people in the group were not talking about who Biden could replace her with that would help them get to Biden. One said Mitt Romney.
They're center right. We found the Mitt Romney people.
When you look at these people, you have people saying things like, what did she even do with the gun violence task force? Well, what we did was we passed a gun reform law, and violent crime is down all the way across the country. Now, I'm not saying this is because of Kamala Harris. It was because a lot of different things happening. But the point is, like, here's a specific thing. The guy remembers she's been put it on this task force, and then thinks that like nothing happened. And I don't know how to answer that. And we see so many, people saying like, well, maybe RFK, but RFK doesn't quite have the experience. He doesn't have the experience. He's 70 years old. He's not going to get the experience to be vice president. And I just, I look at these people and I just think, good luck, America.
JVL, thanks for joining me once again. And per our contractual agreement, you do not have to do this again for at least 3 months. Thanks to all of you for listening to the Focus Group podcast. Please go subscribe to the Bulwark on YouTube and rate, review this show on Apple Podcasts. We will be back next week.